All right, let's get into something really fascinating. Picture this, it's 1974. The world is going crazy over flying saucers and alien visitors. But what if someone decided to stop just collecting wild stories and tried to create an actual scientific field guide for aliens?
So, this is it. This is the cover of a special report from a French UFO group called GEPA. And yeah, it might look like an old-school sci-fi mag, but what they were trying to do here was way more serious. It really makes you wonder, right? Was this a genuine scientific attempt to bring order to one of the biggest mysteries of all time? And that's really the heart of what we're digging into here. At a time when UFO sightings were just this chaotic mess of stories that most people just brushed off, one researcher looked at it all and thought, hey, maybe there's a pattern in all this madness.
I mean, just think about the early 70s. You had reports coming in from all over the planet, and every single one was different. People were describing all sorts of beings, all kinds of ships. It was just a total jumble of information with no real organized analysis.
And then this guy comes along. Jader U. Pereira, a researcher from Brazil. He saw all this chaos not as noise, but as data waiting to be sorted. In fact, the editor of the publication was so impressed he called Pereira's work an admirable effort of documentation and classification. This guy wasn't trying to be a sci-fi writer. He was trying to be a biologist, a taxonomist for the unknown.
So how in the world do you start classifying something so bizarre? Well, Pereira took a pretty scientific approach. He knew that before you can find any patterns, you have to clean up your data. You have to filter out the noise to find the signal.
And he started with a huge pile of data. Between 1968 and 1970, he managed to collect 333 different cases of alleged occupant sightings from around the globe. That's a massive amount of work. But he knew, of course, that not all reports are created equal.
And this is where he really put on his skeptic's hat. He was ruthless. If a source seemed shaky, gone. Not enough details in the story? Out. Anything that just felt off, or where the witness might have been mistaken, he tossed it. And this is a big one. He completely rejected stories from contactees, people who claimed they were buddies with aliens, because he wanted to focus only on those raw, unexpected encounters.
So after all that cutting and filtering, what was he left with? 230 cases. Now, this wasn't just a random collection of spooky stories anymore. This was a refined, curated dataset that he felt was strong enough to actually start analyzing for real patterns.
Okay, so this is where it gets really good. After all that work, collecting, filtering, organizing, what do you think was the very first, most stunning pattern that just jumped out of the data? What was the one thing that connected hundreds of these sightings from all over the world?
Get this, an absolutely staggering 95.8% of the reports described the occupants as having a human form. Let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about gray aliens with huge eyes or green blobs or insectoids. Overwhelmingly, people were describing beings that looked, well, human-like. This was the game changer. This was the signal in the noise he was looking for, and it became the foundation for his entire catalog.
And that discovery is what leads us to the main event, the catalog of occupants itself. Based on this humanoid supermajority, Pereira started to sort and group the sightings into these really specific types and even subvariants.
And just look at how he did it. This is not some sci-fi comic book. This looks like a page straight out of a biology textbook, right? It's a taxonomic chart. He was literally treating these alleged visitors like a naturalist discovering new species in the wild.
All right. First up, we have Type 1. This is the big category, covering any occupants who looked pretty much human and were of a normal, average height. The kind of beings that, if you put them in a trench coat and a hat, might just blend in.
But here's where the details get wild. Even within Type 1, you have these variants. Variant 1 is your average height, often blonde, pretty chill. But then, boom, you get Variant 2. They're taller, they're bald, and they carry some kind of tube that paralyzes people. And Variant 3 are giants, over 2 meters tall, wearing glowing clothes and using a weapon described as a glowing ball.
Okay, now we're moving on to Type 2. And the big defining difference here? It's all about size. These beings were consistently described as being really small, about the size of a child.
And again, the consistency of the details is just crazy. A specific height, between 1 and 1.2 meters. A specific uniform color, blue or gray-green. And their behavior was always evasive, like they didn't want to be seen, but they were never aggressive. And we're not talking about sightings in one little town. This is from Canada, the US, Brazil, France, Italy, all describing the same thing.
Now let's jump ahead to type 4, because this is where the descriptions start to get a little more, well, alien, moving away from that normal human look. The main feature for type 4 was their skin. It was described as wrinkled or rough, and in one case, as if it had been burned. Pretty creepy. They had slits for eyes and a mouth, a pointy little nose. But here's the twist. Despite looking pretty strange, they were consistently reported as being non-hostile, no aggression at all. Now, it is really easy to get swept up in all these incredible details. But we have to take a step back and look at how the people who published this stuff actually framed it. They were super careful to keep it grounded.
This right here is maybe the most important sentence in the whole document. The editor, René Fortier, put it right up front in the introduction. He's basically saying, hey everyone, this is a hypothesis. It's a theory we built to organize the data. We are not, I repeat, not saying any of this is a demonstrated fact.
Even the way they used the term extraterrestrial was a clue. They literally put it in quotation marks in the original French title. For them, the idea that these beings from other planets wasn't a conclusion. It was just the most logical starting point, a working theory that seemed to fit the data they had collected. It was a place to start, not the final answer.
And you know, that's the real takeaway here. Forget for a moment whether you think any of it's real. This 1974 catalog is an incredible snapshot of the human mind at work. It's a perfect example of our deep need to find patterns, to create order out of chaos, and to try and make sense of the unknown. So it really leaves you wondering, what does this amazing, forgotten field guide truly tell us? Maybe not so much about aliens, but a whole lot about ourselves.